So making the perfect PALS has never been easier than it is right now. Yes, it's kinda strange to say that, but thanks to the two major updates so far, Pocket Pair added a lot more control over both the capturing and the breeding process. And while there's still a lot more RNG being involved here, in this video I'm going to show you a step-by-step guide of what I typically do to get the strongest possible companions with perfect IV stats, best new rainbow tier passives, and a lot more on top. Now, right from the very beginning, to make the whole process of capturing PALs with the best possible passives is to get a Yakumo up and ready, and specifically something similar to mine right here. This guy was added back in Sakurajima update, and it has one of the best partner skills in the game called the Birds of a Feather. So when fighting together, it becomes easier to encounter PALs with the same passive skills as this spell. So what this means is whichever passive skills Yakumo features, they have a stronger chance to also appear on the PALs that you're about to capture. That is why on mine I put Demon God, Musclehead, Ferocious, and Serenity. These are some of the most desired stats for a DPS build, so I'm trying to have these also be present on the PALs that I'm about to capture. Now, the chance for that to happen is not 100% guaranteed. By default, Birds of a Feather is only a 15% chance, but it jumps to 30% if you max out Yakumo at rank 4. So whatever you do besides getting the passives you desire, also make sure that you max them out to rank 4. IVs in this case do not matter since we can transfer those, so for now you can pretty much ignore them. But what this means is that now we have a 30% chance for at least one of Yakumo's passives to also appear on the captured target. And in the case of having multiple passives transfer, the chance goes lower and lower with the number increases. For example, having 2 passives transfer is only a 9% chance, meanwhile having all 4 of them transfer is less than 1%. But that is still heaps better than purely relying on RNG, and it's just going to make it much easier for you to get all of those PALs with at least one extra desired passive. Other few things to note is that you're going to want Yakumo outside of the sphere whenever you're doing the capturing, so as long as you're doing when you're throwing the sphere, it's going to be enough. It doesn't have to be from the beginning of the fight. Second of all, you can pass pretty much all of the passives with the exception of the exclusive ones like Legend, Lucky, Lord of, and so on. And coincidentally, you also cannot overwrite exclusive passives either. So for example, if you were to capture a Frostallion, you cannot overwrite his Legend no matter what. Now, the next thing you're going to want to focus on is having PALs with high natural IVs. And the reason for that is because since you're going to introduce them in the breeding process, you don't want to waste a ton of time on offsprings that continuously have bad IVs. You want to have at least some of those inherited from the parents. And one of the best sources for high IV PALs is alpha/boss PALs. Yes, this includes Frostallion, Frostallion Noct, anything that is a boss will have naturally high occurring IVs by default. So 1, 2, sometimes all 3 of them will be in the green, which means at least 70 out of 100. You can of course see and unlock all of this information if you unlock the ability glasses at level 33, which is going to display all of the IVs at a glance. But it's very useful, and now you can introduce all of these in your breeding process to help a ton with this. And just to show you the difference between a bad and a good IV PAL, we have a Xenolord here with only 17 into attack IV and another one that has 100. But if you pay attention to the difference in attack power, it's over 500, which can translate to thousands upon thousands of extra damage that you would be losing if you did not have that. So at least focus on PALs that have naturally high attack IV, as in the case of the health and the defense stat, the difference is not as big. It's still useful to have nonetheless, but definitely focus a lot more on having attack IV as high as possible. Conversely, if you also want to make the process a lot easier, especially for naturally occurring alpha bosses in the wild, what you can do is to just travel away from them and back about 200 units to have them respawn until you see them with the best IVs possible. And that's why I'm also always capturing a ton of Anubis and Frostallions, because they are naturally occurring alphas in the wild, which means having higher naturally IVs, and on top of that, they're also part of most of the best breeding combos in the game. Even one right now that features both of them gives you Bastigore, so you can actually farm for a really easy Bastigore if you have proper Frostallions and proper Anubises. A special case I want to make here for IVs is that the fruits that were added to the raids, as well as to a couple of the vendors with some of the new currencies, they absolutely do transfer to the offsprings as well. So if you boost the parents with these fruits, yes, those extra IVs will count towards the offsprings that you get. It's still going to be a random chance, and there are some very strange calculations in there, but I mean, yeah, the chances are going to be much better if you have those parents with higher IVs, no matter if they were naturally occurring or from the fruits themselves. I can absolutely confirm that after thousands upon thousands of breeding sessions. Moving on though, another thing that Pocket Pair added on top to make this process even easier for both IVs and for the passives is this guy right here called Dr. Brown. I'm going to show you how to get him guaranteed from a spot in just a little bit. But what this guy does is that once per day, he can do a very strange surgery on any pal you present to him to give you one of these three possible outcomes. The best of which, and the one you're hunting for, is this right here. You get 15 plus to all IVs for that pal and an extra positive passive, and typically that positive passive is at least of legendary quality and can even go all the way to rainbow quality. So yes, even Demon God, even Vampiric, Serenity, all of those can be in that spawn pool. But there's also a catch. You may have a chance to actually make that pal worse because there are two negative outcomes as well. The bad one is that you get a minus 15 to all IVs and a negative passive instead. And the worst of the worst is minus 30 to all IVs and replace a good passive with a negative one. So there's a chance for that to happen as well. That is why in this case you're going to always use pals that you no longer main or are just there sitting and collecting dust in your pal deck. I mean, you can still risk it on a pal that you're planning to main, but I don't really recommend it, or if you do, at least make a backup save so that you can redo that again. But otherwise, it can be actually very helpful. So to get the doctor, you can pretty much find them spawning randomly in any spot that already naturally features humanoid enemies. For example, a very good one is right here in the Sakurajima Island, northern part of it. There's a beach right here with a lot of humanoid enemies spawning. So what I did is I set up a marker around this area and I just moved away about 200 meters with my jet dragon and then came back to force in those respawns, just like the case with the alpha bosses from the previous point. So just rinse and repeat about 5 or 6 times. Doing this should spawn that doctor. Go ahead and capture him right away. You're going to want to do this pretty much every day, so having him in a display case back at your base is going to be a very easy way to have him available at all times. But anyway, if you've done all of this, for now, you're going to be setting up yourself for a lot of success. That is why from this point on, I'm going to show you some of the breeding that I've been doing and some of the setups. Obviously, this is a smaller scale one as I've only built it for this video, but basically, you're going to typically want at least a few breeding farms, at least 4 of them, since it's going to take quite a bit of while to get all of those eggs. You can get about 20 or so eggs per each breeding farm, which can take several hours. But if you have like 4, 5 or more of those farms, obviously it can be like 100 plus eggs per hour, which is going to drastically increase, pretty much your likelihood of getting the pals you want much sooner. Another thing that's going to further help a ton with this is also the large scale electric egg incubator at level 60, which lets you hatch 10 eggs at a time. And yeah, you can also go maybe for some of the new passive base traits. There are 2 of them for kindling and 1 of them for cooling, which can reduce the timer for the egg incubation, I believe, from about an hour plus to 10 minutes if you stack both of them, but you can also reduce that to 0 pretty much in the world settings. Typically, that's what I do. But from the egg incubator, now it's much easier to both hatch and see all of this information directly from the incubation screen. This helps a ton and just is such a massive quality of life change that it's unbelievable. Like you can see right here, this was the process that I used to get the best Igor. First, I caught its best possible parents out in the wild from the alpha versions, and then I continuously bred both for Stallion and Anubis as much as I could until I got a proper one. But the process is pretty much the same for every other pal that you're breeding, with the exception of maybe the exclusive ones, but more on that in just a little bit. However, in the meantime, what you need to know is this formula right here. First of all, duplicate passive skills on both parents do not help nor harm inheritance chances. That's because pretty much all of those chances are going to apply to all passives. So it doesn't really matter if you have duplicates or not on those parents. It's not going to increase nor reduce the chance for that to trigger on the offspring. It also doesn't matter which parent has which passive skill. You can go with the typical 2-to-2 layout, 3-to-1, or even have 4 desired passives on one parent and 0 ones on the other parent. The distribution chance is going to be the same. So you can see right here the chance of inheritance of all parents' passives without having any random passives besides that. So for one of them is 40%, but for 4 it's only 10%. So only 10% chance to have all 4 of the passives on the parents to transfer to one of the offsprings. In the case of IV transfers, it's actually even better. It's 21.6% to inherit all 3 IVs from either parents. That is why I typically include IVs, or well, parents with IVs that are close to 100, so that we can also have those on the offsprings immediately. But if we were to combine both of these and have an offspring that has both all of the 4 passives from the parents and all of the best IVs from them, the chances you can see totaling up to only about 2.16%, or about 1 in 46 hatches, which is actually not that bad, all things considered. Now, I do want to cover a few other things on top, and specifically I want to go over this use case for a Xenolord build. And one thing you want to do is to set up a proper farming base just for that. Now, one of the best and most resourceful, and one that includes the least amount of cheating, I would say, is just setting up a rocket launcher base with about 15 or so rocket launchers. I'm going to post a link down below to a guy that is very good on that, and also shout out to the YouTuber who did that. But basically, this can work really great even for Xenolord, even though it is going to have a chance to still destroy some of those turrets. One of the best options for that is to build a base right here on the Icewind Islands. There are many big walls over here that you can use for a base and kind of surround a middle area, put a bunch of turrets or rocket launchers so that they aim at the middle section, and whichever boss you spawn in here will get absolutely destroyed. The only thing I recommend having is high level PALS to control the turrets, as that's going to also increase the damage that they deal. Your alternative is to just turn up the player damage and damage against spells, which kind of feels a bit like cheating, even though you can reach some high numbers. And that one also involves breeding a ton of very strong pals, which kind of defeats the purpose of this guide. We really want to make this as good as possible, efficient, and maybe even something that you might want to try on a first time playthrough. But like I said, I do have a use case over here with Xenolord and my path to crafting the best possible one. In my case, I wanted to use Vampiric, so that is the version. But in both of the cases with the eggs that drop from the raid boss, which I farmed about 20, as well as from the eggs that you farm via breeding, both of these have a chance to also spawn additional passives. And yes, this also includes the ones of rainbow quality, such as Vampiric, Demon Lord, and so on and so forth. So in this case, what I've noticed is that if you have parents with no or very few stats less than 4, there's a much higher chance for the offsprings to start featuring random extra passives in their rotation. So let's say, for example, you use 2 parents and between them they only have 2 passive stats. Offsprings may have a chance to spawn with up to like 4 passive stats, so the extra 2 from them may even be of this rainbow quality. And on more than a few occasions, I've seen one spawning with extra Demon Lord, Mastery over Fasting, even like Vampiric. I've actually seen this triggering, especially when I used parents with a reduced number of passives. In this case, I was specifically only using them to target, or at least RNG target farm, some of these rainbow quality passives. And what I do from this point on is basically just add the better offsprings into the rotation and replace the old and maybe no longer useful parents. Let's say, for example, I get an offspring that both has good IVs and even has maybe more extra passives compared to his parent. Now I'm going to add it in that rotation so that I have much higher chances for its own offsprings to further have more better IVs and more passives that I really want. And eventually you can bring all of that up together. Say you have 2 parents and between them you have both the IVs and 4 of the desired passives. Now you can just add them in the mix, and it's not going to take too long for you to get the best perfect outcome. Like it said previously, that chance is a mere 2% or 1 in 46, which is not as bad as it may sound, especially if you follow steps 1 to 4 and ensure that you have good proper PAL parents from the get-go with all of the desired stats and all of the desired passives that you want to transfer. And this is pretty much it with the breeding guide. Let me know down below if there's anything else that I missed or anything else that you might want to ask. I can also answer them in the comments down below. In the meantime, thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.